Welcome back to the channel, guys. In today's video, we're talking about the VB WRX transmissions, whether or not they're failing, what's happening, everything you need to know, and whether all this kind of scaring and hype around these transmissions failing is real, and whether it's something you should consider when you're buying a VB WRX. Now, I've wanted to make this video for some time, but I've decided to wait because there was a lot of hype maybe 3 or 4 months ago, especially on social media, talking about these transmissions not holding up and not doing well. And I wanted to get on and really tap into the community, get to some more car meets as it got warmer, figure out what's really happening to people, actually talk to some owners that have had failed transmissions, whether they kept or sold the car, and just get a better understanding. And I'm gonna report everything I know with a tiny bit of speculation in this video. So let's get into it. And I didn't wanna make this video sitting in front of my car, so I apologize, guys. We're taking a drive in my 2022 WRX today. Part of that's also the fact that I've installed maybe 20 parts since you guys have last seen the car. You can already probably tell there's a few things on this. They weren't on it last time and you can see through the windows, but you guys will see those soon. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get straight into it. So if you live underneath a rock and you're not part of the VB community, or you just haven't heard, there's been speculation about the WRX's transmission in the VB WRXs. Now, it's very similar to the VA WRX. For all intents and purposes, there's actually not that much of a difference. There's actually a lot of part renumbering, but with that said, it's essentially the same transmission. But everyone's talking about these transmissions failing or tanking or having really bad problems in third gear. There's also this level of third gear fragility that's being thrown around and just a bunch about these transmissions. So I gathered as much information as I could over a few months, and let's start here. So the first thing that I do want to say, blanket statement, this is the boring thing to say, it's easier to make power on the FA24 engine in the 2022 Plus WRX. So you see significantly more owners hitting the point where their transmission is the weak point and not the engine on these cars. So the entire community previously that drove WRXs would hit maximums on their engine and their transmission. Yeah, they could do a little bit of clutch work. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. They're probably fine. That is no longer the case. People are hitting the maximums for the transmissions. What does this mean? More people are getting to the point where they are doing some damage to their transmissions when it's really more so they're pushing far too much power through their cars, and little things like missing a gear, although that's really hard to do in a WRX, but little things where you're not taking perfect care and use of your transmission make a much larger impact when you're pushing significantly more power. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's just say you're thinking about a stock WRX and you're worried. Well, I am here to report that there has been a fair amount of stock WRXs reporting issues with their transmissions. And it's enough to have me making this video and wanting to talk about it, because it's not like an insignificant number. It's not like every WRX is gonna blow up, but there are like a fair amount of stock VB WRX owners that are losing their transmissions. Potentially even the larger thing here is people are having issues with third gear. Now, I will say, having owned a VA WRX, there have definitely been some moments that I've experienced with this WRX that I didn't experience ever with my other WRX. And I was tuned with my other WRX. This WRX has definitely had some moments in, while I'm shifting, and actually specifically third gear, where I wonder what the heck is happening with the car. Now, I'm not like, oh, it's slipping or something like that is happening. I just can't exactly figure out what's going on. But what I've basically found is a fair amount of people have been reporting issues with third gear where they are having a hard time getting into third gear. Third gear is slipping, or there's just some abnormal, transmission around third gear. People just seem to report it. Now, that's not the end of the world, because third gear has, in most cars is like the most used gear. It's the gear that you abuse the most. You actually probably abusing the engine the most. But I think the more important thing is the amount of people that have lost transmissions on stock cars. I've gone to enough events now and done enough asking to find, at the very least, I've talked to 6 owners personally that have had WRXs that have had failed transmissions 4 were 2022s, the rest were 2023s. And actually only 2 of them were tuned, and they were only making like, one was making like 350 wheel, one was making like 330 something wheel. So not a huge amount of power. Both were in the like 350s for torque. It's a fair amount of torque for the clutch, but shouldn't be like blowing up a transmission, honestly. And although that doesn't sound like a lot, that's just where I am locally going to car meets, and I don't see a lot of WRXs around here. More so, I'm hearing it from my community, and I did ask a few polls about people that have these cars if they could email me if they were having problems, and I've now talked to about 10 owners in the last 2 months that have lost stock transmissions. Now, you still might be saying, well, that's not a whole lot of transmissions. And honestly, my response is, you're kind of right. So it's not like we're having problems across the board, but it is enough to honestly make this video and say, look, there might be a problem. There might be something going on. Now, is it user defined? Is it whatever it is? Yeah, there were a few transmissions that went bad with the 2015 through 2021. But the short answer is, it's becoming more and more apparent that if you push power on these transmissions, you're really risking a lot. Now, if I look at the past 6 months in conversations that I've had with tuned WRXs, especially those folks in my circles where we're trying to push power, you know, we're making a lot more power than we should be, we're seeing them go more often than not. I would be honest, in my little circle of people that are doing and working and designing parts for these cars and trying to develop parts, the amount of STI transmission swaps that are happening, fairly high. Well, let's just leave it at that. It's pretty fun to have an STI transmission in these cars, but they are certainly user error because they're just pushing too much power. The short answer though is something could be happening. And I wanted to make the video more so to urge caution as you're pushing power with these cars. Just because the F824 makes more power doesn't mean you should go and make that power, because you still have a weak point, and that is your transmission. And no, your clutch isn't always just going to slip. You might actually do irreversible damage to the transmission itself, or your clutch might just slip. It's hard to tell. But I think the one thing that has been abundantly clear is that it is hard to do what a lot of us wanted to do with this car based on what this car brought to the table without changing the transmission or really taking a risk. And it's honestly, as somebody that's had this car, had the intention of building it and doing all these things to it, it's made me really think about my ownership of this car. And I've kind of just come to terms with the fact that I will need to put an STI transmission in this car if I want to make power, because if I'm going to make power, I'm going to make real power. And I think that it's an interesting problem. I think Subaru really needs to figure that out. They know we want to tune these cars. I just fundamentally do not understand why this is an issue that hasn't been addressed. Obviously, as somebody that doesn't work for Subaru right now, there's nothing I can do about it. But the short answer here, guys, is be on the lookout, be aware. The transmissions aren't glass, but they're not perfect. And if you're gonna make more power, please consider the weak points of your car. Because yes, after a bunch of research and looking, these things are not perfect. Now, I'm going to continue my search and try to find out as much information as I can about what exactly went wrong with the transmissions. But honestly, and I think Subaru is doing probably the smart thing here, is for all of these cars that end up at the dealer, because even the people that have them tuned and can't get an STI transmission, the dealer right now is really the only option economically to be able to do it. You know, they end up at the dealer and the dealer just replaces the transmission. They're not doing diagnostics, very rarely are they, and if they are, they're not telling the consumer. So for everyone that had paperwork for getting new transmissions, I couldn't actually get any details on what was actually done. So I will continue my search to try to figure out how to do that. Hopefully I'll be able to get some information that is actually tangible on the engineering and mechanics around it. But I will do a pull here before I leave you guys. Let's get into here and let's do it. This car is so fun to drive, and you know, it's I think it's like doing a poll on transmission video makes a lot of sense because, well, I mean, Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law, it's just like sometimes when I make these videos, I talk about something serious and it scares me because I want to do a bunch of stuff. I got into the car and I was like, I'm going to go drive around the woods and really have fun. And my gut was like, if you do it, you're going to blow your transmission because you're talking about transmissions, you want to go have fun. It's kind of still rush hour, you know, you're going to have to get around traffic. And I ended up just driving around town. I mean, you guys can't see it, but I did just go to Whole Foods. So it's just one of those videos. It's also a video that I just had to, I had to make because I've done enough that like the evidence is there. I mean, the transmissions aren't perfect. They are certainly not doing as well as the VA WRX. So, I mean, there will be a part 2 to this. I will get deeper into the whole engineering aspect of it. But otherwise, thanks for watching the video, guys. Lots of installs coming and lots of new announcements to the channel coming soon. I'll see you guys later.